Okay, well, we're going to take a look again. I'm assuming you've seen this in the YouTube video file already, and hopefully had seen the whole film. Actually, it's very good, and so do take a look. The scene I want to focus in on is, of course, the encounter between the Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall characters named Jack and Wendy in the film. Although I think that this brief little moment before that encounter, is in some way preparing us for it. And so Danny in the film, the young man we see here, is gifted or cursed with this kind of second sight. And part of that second sight, as the camera zooms in on him, is this kind of ability to have visions. And the vision that we get here is something that we've seen in the film previously, with the elevator doors opening and this torrent of blood being let loose into this hotel lobby, which was actually shot real size. In other words, this was using a set. They shot most of this in Shepperton, England. The exteriors were shot in Colorado. Kubrick didn't like traveling, but they bought all this expensive blood, fake blood, and put it into this full-sized elevator and then open the doors for this one shot that probably takes up about a total of 40 seconds on film. But this vision is kind of interesting in terms of the use of color. It's significantly red, suggestive of blood. But here's where I want to begin to focus. And so the things we'll be looking at will be relative to cinematography and mise-en-scène. And that means we'll be looking at things like lighting, the quality of light, the direction of light, the use of makeup, costuming, setting, camera movement, camera angle, all of that as it comes to bear on the image and its impact on the viewer. And of course, there's no way we can account for everything, but I wanted to just note briefly the setting, and here it really is basically out of focus. But that still doesn't detract from the fact that it's there. And what it does is provide kind of a contrast in color warmth. We've got the warmth of the wood and the coolness of the walls. And later we'll see how the setting will kind of make a greater impact. Costuming is relatively simple. Jack is wearing a plaid shirt, dark, which gives him some weight, right? He seems to be substantial here. Gives him some weight, kind of brownish red. And interestingly as well, he's looking at the camera. In terms of makeup, he looks like he hasn't made up at all. He looks like he just woke up, right? And not having shaved in a while. But all that, of course, is the consequence of spending time getting him camera ready so that he does look, in fact, disheveled. So the camera angle looks up at him slightly, but interestingly, I'm going to pull up my drawing tool here. It pretty much conforms to the rule of thirds. Terrible line. Let me try that again. In terms of like the first line being pretty much where you would expect the eyes to be, and Jack more or less centered in the frame, slightly to the right perhaps, but occupying significant space, but not in real sharp close-up, so that he doesn't seem to be threatening. But interestingly, if it's the case with framing, in the case of movement, he's moving directly at the camera. And so that presents a bit of a threat because the camera is also moving away. So let's just let this play out a little bit and get the reverse shot with. And here it is. And so this is Shelley Duvall, and the shot really is radically different in several ways. One, the camera's moving in. Shelley Duvall is moving away. So with camera movement and actor movement, it's the exact reverse. Also, Shelley Duvall occupies the exact opposite kind of space as Jack Nicholson, where Jack was more to the right. Shelley Duvall is more to the left, even if still she does conform more or less to the rule of thirds in terms of where the framing lies. However, she's holding a bat, which would seem to be a weapon, but it also creates this strong kind of diagonal line, which is not at all threatening, but does suggest instability. In terms of costuming, I think it's interesting that she is wearing a turtleneck, and so that doesn't make her seem threatening. She's got on very casual clothing, but I think possibly the most notable thing is her expression and the fact that she is not like Jack looking directly at the camera but looking away, but also the lighting, right? You can't avoid the lighting, which seems to be coming from the windows largely, and is, but there's also other lighting on the set. And so what it does with this strong backlighting is it softens the character. It makes her seem more diffuse, and so the threat is clearly there. So again, we'll let this play out, and this back and forth movement between Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. And now Jack is really becoming centered, right? He's slightly closer to the camera. He's more centered, and he's also being framed. This is something that's going to happen throughout this scene by the background, which kind of lends him these strong vertical lines, this sense of power. And so, but this movement toward the camera becomes more and more threatening. And it's interesting because as this plays out, it's going to shift a little bit insofar as Jack Nicholson moving into Shelley Duvall's light, and Shelley Duvall, and it's happening already, is moving out of this really highly diffuse light into something that's going to give her a little more definition as the scene goes on. But we're looking up slightly at Shelley Duvall as well. But we're still, again, moving away, and again with Jack Nicholson. And here we've got this really nice use of lighting, but also this really interesting use of framing. And so let's start with the latter first. And so again, using the background to frame Jack with these strong vertical lines. And again, the light is coming strongly from the left to the extent that it really paints this almost two-faced look to Jack Nicholson, who again is very dark and in terms of costuming, but also here now in terms of lighting as well. So Shelley Duvall now becoming possibly more substantial as she moves away from the lights. This movement that Jack is going to make here to the left, to the right, camera right, is kind of interesting, and then left, it's almost as if he's surrounding her. And we have now the introduction of two diagonal lines with Shelley Duvall. So we have the bat, and we also have the staircase, and the staircase here. And so we've got this whole smattering of lines. And of course, now too, though, we've got Shelley Duvall moving into this harder light, but that's kind of overridden by the fact that she's being chased by Jack Nicholson. I'm thinking Jack would have been framed possibly here, as we've seen him before, within the setting, but that's not the case. Shelley Duvall is not framed within here, and we're again being introduced to these diagonal lines which suggest instability. So we'll let this play on a little bit more. Moving closer, moving away. The lines of the staircase becoming more prominent as she backs closer to them. And I want you to notice Jack Nicholson's movements here, because what's happening is that Kubrick is using a wide-angle lens so that his movements toward the camera are going to seem more exaggerated and threatening as a consequence. And he's going to begin to occupy more and more space by his gesturing toward the camera. And here the contrast with Shelley Duvall is dramatic. Jack Nicholson is clearly closer to the camera. Shelley Duvall is almost flat against the background, whereas Jack Nicholson pops out. And so, and again, the way he's using the space. His movements are strong, threatening, and erratic. And it's really quite nice. And Shelley Duvall again continues to retreat up the stairs, so she's beginning to gain a kind of sense of superiority in terms of height, right? But once again, she's backed up into this scene, this setting where the lights are really hot and she's lost some of that substance. But she's going to back up, and then Jack Nicholson is just as this kind of dark presence on the right of the screen, which is really occupying more screen space than Shelley Duvall is. More diagonal lines with the banister of the staircase. They're using here a Steadicam. This is one of the first films to use the Steadicam so frequently, and actually one of the key operators of this film was Garrett Morris, who invented the Steadicam, and he had to fly back and forth to the States because this production took far more time, like most of Kubrick's works, than they had scheduled for. And but yeah, some really interesting use of the Steadicam throughout this film. Now we're looking down at Nicholson. The lighting again is hard on both the characters, and Shelley Duvall has got this kind of, it's like this play where she's occupying, and the bat as well. She's moving. Jack Nicholson looking smaller. So, as it turns out, he's not. And Shelley Duvall is, in fact, going to clock him. And we get a bit of that conveyed to us, a bit of that threat to Jack Nicholson conveyed to us through the high angle that's looking down at him. But that's also kind of canceled out by Nicholson's movements, by the strong horizontal lines that we see now, by the stairs and the banister and so forth, and again the darkness of his costuming. So really a brilliant moment from a film full of brilliant moments, and I hope you found this useful. So I will see you soon. Take care.